The towering glass facade of Westbridge Holdings gleamed under the morning sun as Evelyn Carter stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished marble floors. Today wasn't just another workday, it was her first as regional director. The crisp weight of her navy blazer grounded her as she accepted a temporary ID badge from the front desk. New employee orientation was printed in bold letters, a facade masking the truth. Just 3 months ago, her world had collapsed. Her husband, Daniel Carter, had not only betrayed her with her closest friend, but had also left her drowning in $150,000 of secret debt. The night he vanished, he'd tossed his wedding ring onto the kitchen counter, sneering, "You're too naive for this world, Evelyn. You'll never recover." But she had, and today, he would find out just how wrong he was. As Evelyn made her way to HR, a familiar voice sent a chill down her spine. Daniel. His laughter was unmistakable. Smooth and confident, the same tone he had used to charm investors and deceive her. Through the glass walls of a nearby conference room, she saw him, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, leaning back in his chair, exuding the arrogance she once mistook for confidence. Their eyes met. For a moment, he looked confused. Then recognition dawned. His smirk returned, but this time it faltered at the edges. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" Before she could respond, Patricia from HR appeared beside her. "Miss Carter, the board is expecting you." The emphasis on her title was deliberate. Daniel's smirk vanished as she walked past him, leaving him with only questions and growing dread. The executive boardroom was filled with hushed voices as Evelyn took her seat at the head of the table. Across from her sat a stunned Daniel, still trying to process what was happening. Chairman Reynolds cleared his throat. "Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our new regional director, Evelyn Carter. She's here to spearhead the restructuring of our investment division." The blood drained from Daniel's face. Evelyn smiled, her voice steady. "Thank you, Chairman. Before we discuss future changes, I have something to present." She slid a folder onto the table. Inside were documents exposing fraudulent investments, transactions Daniel had authorized under the company's name. His fingers twitched as he flipped through the pages, his pulse visibly pounding at his temple. The walls he had so carefully built were beginning to crack. A tense silence filled the boardroom as Evelyn clicked the projector remote, displaying detailed reports of shady investments, unauthorized withdrawals, and falsified client signatures, all linked to Daniel's department. She folded her hands. Over the past 18 months, millions were funneled into high-risk, undisclosed investments. Many of these were hidden under special project accounts, bypassing standard approval channels. Victoria Ellis, the firm's chief compliance officer, adjusted her glasses. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Carter. Do you deny them?" Daniel straightened in his chair, his voice forced and controlled. "These were strategic decisions, high risk, but potential high reward." Evelyn leaned forward. "So high risk that some of our clients lost their entire life savings?" A murmur rippled through the room. Daniel clenched his jaw. He knew he was cornered. But this was just the beginning. The weight of the evidence pressed down on the room. Daniel's confident mask was slipping, his fingers tightening around the documents as if he could will them away. Evelyn tapped the next slide on the screen. "And here, we see client funds redirected without their knowledge. Accounts that should have been protected were drained under the guise of reallocation." A few board members exchanged uneasy glances. Victoria Ellis's voice was sharp. "Mr. Carter, do you have an explanation for this?" Daniel cleared his throat, forcing a smirk. "Risk is part of the business. Clients knew. They didn't," Evelyn cut in, holding up a folder. "Because you forged their consent." Silence. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had built his empire on deception, and now it was collapsing. Beyond the glass walls of the conference room, employees whispered, glancing toward the unfolding drama. Daniel had been untouchable until now. Evelyn continued, her voice unwavering. "The board trusted you, Daniel, just as I once did." She let the words sink in. "This isn't just about money. It's about ethics, integrity, things you discarded the moment they became inconvenient." Chairman Reynolds leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Miss Carter, what course of action do you propose?" Daniel turned toward her, eyes narrowing. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" His voice was low, but not low enough. The board heard him. Evelyn smiled, calm and composed. No, Daniel, but I do enjoy accountability. And then, with a steady breath, she made her move. Evelyn set a final document in front of the board, a list of clients demanding answers. Some had already contacted legal counsel. Daniel's face paled. You wouldn't? I already have, she replied, and so have they. Patricia entered the room and carrying a sealed envelope. From the legal team, she announced, handing it to Chairman Reynolds. The chairman read silently, then exhaled. Effective immediately, Mr. Carter is placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Daniel shot up from his chair. This is insane. Evelyn met his glare with quiet triumph. No, Daniel. This is justice. For the first time, he had no power, no control, just the consequences of his own actions. Daniel stormed out, his steps echoing down the hallway. Employees avoided his gaze, whispers following in his wake. Evelyn remained seated, watching as the board members murmured amongst themselves. Victoria Ellis spoke first. Miss Carter, if you're willing, we'd like you to oversee the restructuring of this department. A month ago, she never would have imagined this moment. Now, she nodded without hesitation. I accept. Outside, she spotted Daniel pacing near the elevators, phone pressed to his ear. Desperation laced his every movement. Patricia approached, lowering her voice. Security will ensure he clears his office today. Evelyn exhaled. This wasn't revenge. It was rebuilding what he had tried to destroy. And it was only the beginning. The air in the office felt different. Lighter. The shadow of Daniel's presence was already fading. Evelyn walked through the 42nd floor, stopping at his now vacant office. Security had done a sweep, collecting files for the investigation. The once pristine desk was bare, stripped of the illusion of power he had wielded for years. Rachel, her former best friend turned compliance officer, hesitated at the doorway. I never thought he'd fall. Evelyn met her gaze. He didn't fall, Rachel. He built a house of lies and expected it to stand forever. She turned toward the waiting employees, their expressions filled with uncertainty. We're not just removing him, she announced. We're rebuilding, and this time we're doing it right. Evelyn stood at the head of the conference room facing the investment team. These were the people Daniel had bullied, pressured, and silenced. Things are changing, she said, her voice steady. You are no longer expected to look the other way. If something feels wrong, you say something. A murmur rippled through the crowd. David, a junior analyst who had once feared Daniel's wrath, raised a tentative hand. What if speaking up gets us in trouble? Evelyn smiled. Then I will handle it. Amanda from HR nodded. We're implementing anonymous reporting systems. No more fear, no more intimidation. The employees exchanged cautious glances. Change was coming, and this time it wouldn't be just for show. That evening, Rachel knocked on Evelyn's office door, a thick folder in hand. I found something, she said, setting it down. Daniel wasn't working alone. Evelyn's pulse quickened as she flipped through the documents. Several names appeared alongside Daniel's. Colleagues who had helped conceal fraudulent investments. Some were still at the company. This is bigger than I thought, Evelyn murmured. Rachel exhaled. You were right. He didn't just fall. He had helped building his empire. Evelyn leaned back, staring at the city skyline. If Daniel was only the beginning, then the real fight was far from over. Tomorrow, she would expose them all. Morning came with quiet tension. Evelyn walked into the boardroom, the weight of Rachel's discovery pressing on her shoulders. Chairman Reynolds raised an eyebrow as she set the folder before him. More names? She nodded. Daniel wasn't the only one. These individuals knowingly approved fraudulent investments, covering his tracks. The boardroom fell silent. Then Victoria Ellis spoke. If we're cleaning house, we clean it completely. Evelyn nodded. That's exactly what I intend to do. Downstairs, in the bustling corridors of Westbridge Holdings, the guilty still walked freely, unaware their time was running out. The reckoning wasn't over, it was just beginning. Evelyn sat at her desk, watching security escort Daniel's former allies from the building. The names in Rachel's folder had been investigated, their involvement undeniable. Amanda from HR entered, her expression firm. 3 resignations. The others are under review. Evelyn nodded, unsurprised. They knew what was coming. David, the junior analyst, knocked hesitantly. Does this mean we're finally free? Evelyn met his uncertain gaze. Yes, but now, we rebuild. The company had been riddled with corruption for too long. Removing Daniel was just the first step. Now she had to ensure no one ever held that kind of unchecked power again. Beyond the glass walls, whispers of change were growing louder. This was no longer just an internal shift, it was a revolution. The old ways were dying, and the employees could feel it. The whispered conversations that once carried fear now held something new: hope. Evelyn gathered the remaining leadership team. Accountability isn't just about removing the bad, she said, scanning their faces. It's about reinforcing the good. We're not just cleaning up, we're rebuilding trust. Victoria Ellis tapped the table. What's your plan? Evelyn pulled up a slide. Transparency, oversight, ethical leadership. Amanda smiled. No more hidden deals, no more intimidation. David exhaled. It finally feels safe? Evelyn nodded. Because it is. For the first time, Westbridge Holdings wasn't just about profit, it was about integrity, and that, Evelyn knew, would be its greatest investment yet. One afternoon, Chairman Reynolds invited Evelyn to his office. The board is impressed, he said, gesturing to the quarterly reports. Clients are responding well. Employees trust leadership again. He leaned forward. We want you to oversee all regional operations, not just this office. Evelyn's breath caught. That's a lot. Reynolds chuckled. We need leaders who don't just put out fires. We need architects who prevent them. The offer wasn't just a promotion. It was validation that everything she had fought for mattered. She thought of the debt Daniel had left her with, the betrayal that had nearly broken her. Then she thought of the employees who now walked these halls without fear. Evelyn smiled. I accept. Weeks later, Evelyn crossed paths with Daniel in the lobby. He looked different, smaller. You won, he said quietly. Evelyn tilted her head. Winning implies I was playing your game. Daniel exhaled, rubbing his temples. I thought power was control. Turns out, real power is, what, trust? Evelyn smiled. Real power is earning trust and keeping it. As she walked away, she didn't feel triumph, just peace. Daniel had been wrong. She had survived, and now she was leading something far greater than revenge, a legacy of change. Evelyn stood before a packed conference room. The employees of Westbridge Holdings had gathered, their faces expectant. This company was built on ambition, she began, but ambition without integrity leads to disaster. A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Evelyn clicked to the next slide, a new leadership structure, employee protections, and client transparency measures. David raised a hand. How do we make sure this never happens again? Evelyn smiled. By holding ourselves accountable, not just leadership, all of us. For too long, fear had ruled these halls, but not anymore. Rachel, standing near the back, met Evelyn's gaze. She had once been part of the problem. Now, she was part of the solution. Westbridge Holdings was finally becoming what it was meant to be. The first ethical investment reports came in. Client satisfaction had risen by 63%. Profits weren't just stable, they were growing. Chairman Reynolds reviewed the data, nodding. Turns out, honesty is profitable. Evelyn laughed. Who would have thought? Daniel had always claimed that power meant taking whatever you could. But now, Westbridge Holdings was proving that success could be built on transparency. Amanda from HR stopped by with an update. We've had record-high applications. People want to work here. Evelyn's chest swelled with pride. This wasn't just a recovery, it was a transformation. Beyond the numbers, beyond the restructuring, she had created something lasting. And for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. One morning, Rachel appeared in Evelyn's office, a familiar envelope in hand. It's from Daniel, she said hesitantly. Evelyn opened it. Inside was a check for $150,000, the exact amount of debt he had left her with. A note was attached. I can't undo what I did, but maybe this helps fix what I broke. Evelyn sighed, staring at the money. Part of her wanted to reject it. But then she thought of the financial literacy programs they were launching, designed to prevent others from being manipulated like she had been. She picked up a pen, flipping the check over. Let's put it toward the Employee Education Fund, she said. Rachel smiled. That's fitting. Evelyn stood in her office, looking over the skyline. A year ago, she had been drowning in betrayal. Now, she had built something greater than revenge. She had built change. Westbridge Holdings was no longer a company controlled by fear. It was a place where people thrived, where trust was a foundation, not a weakness. David knocked on the door. The Singapore office is adopting our transparency model. Evelyn grinned. That's just the beginning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she reflected on everything that had led her here. Daniel's betrayal had once shattered her, but from that wreckage, she had built an empire of integrity. And this was only the start. Did Evelyn handle things the right way? What would you have done in her place? Let's talk in the comments. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More incredible stories are coming your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss them.